All right. Well, to begin our time, what I want to do is we're going to start with a short kind of meditation video, if you will. So I want you to engage with this, and then we're going to dive into our time together. I found it, if any of you are familiar with the group Invisible Children, it's from a video that was called Coney 2012, in which they exposed just some horrendous humanitarian violations. And what I love about this group is they used social media to activate a generation to think about things in a new way. But what I love about the intro is it shows just how radically our world has shifted. And I'll be honest with you. I'm what you classify as a grandpa millennial. This is what that means. I was born in 1981, so I'm one of the first millennials. And so for me, a lot of the changes that you see all around you, it was like when you're at the beach and you're standing in front of the ocean and you just kind of start to walk in and gradually the water gets deeper and deeper and deeper. That for me was my experience with all these shifts and change. I didn't notice it because the water just gradually got deeper and deeper for me. You know, the younger millennials, you were just always in the ocean, swimming around. So you have no clue, just the radical shift of culture that's happened. But I realize there's a whole group of us here, Gen X, baby boomers, even some builders, who this culture, it feels like when you're a little kid and you don't know how to swim, and your dad takes you to the deep end of the pool, and he throws you in and says to his wife, he'll figure it out. So what we want to do today is we just want to have an opportunity not just to talk about this new age that we're in, but I want you to interact. I want you to be a part of this. So this is a little bit of an experiment. So you see a hashtag up in front of you, Day of Hom 2015. You all are really good at hashtags here at the SEM. You were trending on call day. Very impressive. So I want to offer this as an opportunity, maybe just more to set you free. Interact with the hashtag. Comment on the things you want to comment on. Have reactions you want to have. Post the questions you want to post. And in fact, if you're not incredibly familiar with things like hashtags, we're offering an option here that we use every single Sunday at our church, The Point. We're going to allow you to text in your questions and your comments and your reactions. So all you've got to do is pull out your phone if you have any kind of text messaging and text the word Point Teaching, all one word, no spaces, to the phone number 90210. That's Point Teaching to the phone. Yeah, that's going to be a hard one to remember. To the phone number 90210. And if you want, just pull out your text box, get it prepped, because we want to hear from you. We want to be able to interact, because the reality is our world has changed. And for some of us, that is a frightening thought. But what I've realized is that provides so many opportunities that did not exist even 10 years ago. You see, for me, when I figured out the world had changed, it was kind of a shock. I remember it was 2013, and I was presenting at the National Lutheran Church Extension Fund Conference in one of the side areas on social media, because somebody said, oh, Matt's a social media guru. Now, what that means in the LCMS is this: I owned an iPhone and a Facebook account. They said, there's the guru. No, the reality was God has just been more gracious to me than I deserve, and I got to marry a woman that was far smarter than I was. And while I was getting ready to plant the church, she was working here in St. Louis at the Brown Shoe Company. They've changed names now. And she was one of the people that was in charge of starting Famous Footwear's first Facebook page. And so when we're starting this church, she goes, do you want me to start a Facebook page for it? And I was like, why not? She started a Facebook page that for a while was better than our website. And all of a sudden what I realized was this just wasn't just a place for us to share what we were doing. This started to become a platform for interacting with people, and a platform where those interactions started leading to baptisms. And it was exciting. And so I was so blown away to have the opportunity to stand at this conference and to be able to share with people the opportunity that was in front of us. And so we get through the first session, and the light bulbs are going off, and I'm just excited. Second session, I'm just pumped to still be there doing it again. And all of a sudden, we're not going to name drop, but somebody walks in who is so prominent, I've seen them in publications all around, and they walk to the front row of my lecture, and they sit down right in the front row, and I am just whizzing my pants, okay? And as if that's not bad enough, they look at me and they say, somebody said I needed to come to this session. And I'm like, great. I'm going to be in trouble here. So I'm like, just get through the session. And the session goes well. Light bulbs, again, are going off. And I'm like, does anyone have any questions? front row. And I'm thinking in my mind, does anyone else have any questions? And so I'm like, okay, what's your question? And he goes, did they teach this to you in seminary? And here's what I'm going to tell you about seminary. I loved my seminary experience. I remember the first day walking into the auditorium for our, big orientation. I remember sitting right over there in the corner, and I remember Dr. Meyer standing up and saying, you will not wear hats on this campus, and all of a sudden I was like, I am wearing a backwards baseball cap. This is not going to go well for me. But what I remember most over top of that was one of our professors standing up here and saying, seminary is not a place for you to get all the answers. It's a place where we will give you a toolkit that you can take out into the culture and you can use to engage your culture with a theology that will bring people to salvation. That's cool. And what I realized was that's absolutely what I got. And so I think about my church plant experience, and I realized that had it not been for this place, I would not have been able to do what I'm currently doing. I would not have been able to see the impact that we're currently seeing. And so whenever somebody leverages a question about what I did not get at the seminary, my mind always goes to all the incredible things I did get and where they would have time to squeeze anything else in. So I'm finding the nice, very PC way of saying, we don't really have time to do everything because you just can't encompass everything. But they kept pressing the question. They kept raising their hand and asking the same question until finally I was backed in the corner and all I could say was, no, I didn't learn it. And at that point, I got a little mad because I had this great theological toolkit, yet I didn't have a tool for something that I was spending over half my time wrestling with. And I started asking myself, wait a second, why didn't I get a tool for this? I spent a lot of money on this education. Where are my social media tools? Where's my tool to engage the culture? And then what I realized was, you can't teach something that doesn't exist. See, I started seminary in the summer of 2005. And I got a little timeline up here for you that's just going to be fascinating. This is a timeline that breaks out for you social media and technological change that have literally reshaped the way we think in the world we live in and when they occurred. So 2005, I'm sitting in Dr. Shuckard's Greek class, and all of a sudden YouTube is beginning to reshape the landscape. 2006, I'm taking my first Hom breakout in the summer, and all of a sudden these major brands like Nike and Aquafina and Honda are realizing we need to jump in as a brand into the social media thing. So they're getting MySpace pages. And then all of a sudden, before I go on my vicarage, this little thing called the iPhone comes out, which changed the game, so to speak. It was taking the iPod and the smartphone and basically marrying them together in this beautiful thing. It was like taking my laptop and putting it in my pocket. And all of a sudden, apps were no longer something you eat before dinner. They were something that were reshaping the way we live. And then, by the time I'm getting ready to graduate, of course, vicarage, Facebook hits. I didn't even start my first Facebook account. My girlfriend, now wife, did, because she wanted to communicate with me. And then I'm getting ready to graduate in 2009. And I'm talking to my now mentor, Greg, who's going to be the lead pastor of my church plant training. And he says, you need to get on Twitter. And I said, who in the world is going to waste time microblogging? But I got on Twitter. What I realized was from 2005 to 2009, the world had radically changed. And we may be saying to ourselves, well, why didn't we start engaging that the moment it happened? Because nobody realized the impact that it was going to be. I was doing some research. Have you guys ever seen the first ever YouTube video? Like, nobody saw YouTube becoming the second largest search engine in the world because this is the kind of stuff that was being shared. This is also an example of digital regret. Nobody knew this was going to come, but it's literally reshaped the way we do things. And the reality is this: it's put us face to face with the challenge, not just of our time, but of every time, which is how do we share an unchanging gospel in an ever-changing world? And there's a couple kind of negative ways that we like to sometimes address this challenge. Sometimes we like to say to ourselves as the church that we're the only ones that are facing this problem. Okay, and I wish things were the way they used to be because nobody else has to deal with the ramifications of the world we live in. But the reality is everyone was affected by the rapid shifts we're seeing in communication. PR groups have realized that they can no longer deal in a top-down system. They have to not only do press releases, they have to have teams of people that can manage social media for companies. Companies have learned the hard way that they can't be top-down anymore and have lost thousands and millions of dollars realizing these mistakes when they would delete somebody's post on Facebook because they didn't want to engage with it. Not only that, the financial industry has learned that social media now affects everything. I was shocked when a few weeks ago I opened up my news feed at the Starbucks and this article came up. Big investors say social media influence affects investments. What I learned was literally the stock market is beginning to ebb and flow based on what people are saying on social media. So church, you're not the only one to be affected. Everyone was affected. And the other thing we wrestle with is we like to set up kind of a demon in the room, and we like to say to ourselves, the medium is the message, and how awful is this medium? This is a communications theory. The medium is the message. The problem is, if you have limited experience in communication, you don't realize that it's not the only communication theory. And the problem I see with it is, it's a bit of a reach to say that the medium is the message. Now, they've done some really interesting studies on oral versus written communication mediums and how that does affect the message. So, for example, oral is real time. So you don't have as much time to stop and process and really kind of polish over your words versus written where you can really sit down and you can really kind of massage things. So that will affect the message that's then sent out. But the reality is, it is not the message. Think about it this way. On Twitter, people have used Twitter to do social media bullying, right? Schools are having to wrestle through this. People use Twitter as kind of a gateway to try and pull people into pornography, but people also use Twitter to share the gospel. I had a friend that shared this with me. These are the people that are making the Bible go viral. Now listen to this stat. Last year, 2.6 million Twitter users shared verses 4.3 million times. And what I thought was really cool is this. They pulled out the bots, meaning the people that aren't real, and they just showed you real people and how often they had shared. See, the medium is not the message. It will affect how the message is delivered, but it's not the message. And the other reality we need to wrestle with is technology is always shifting. Ben is going to do an amazing breakout for you guys on just how the church has always had to navigate these changes in technology. In fact, we sit in this room because a little priest named Luther leveraged a new technology and it changed the world. So technology is always shifting. We just have to deal with it. See, the bottom line is this: change is not an option. You can ignore it. You can pretend that it doesn't exist around you. But it's like the air we breathe. You can't escape it. But that's not a bad thing. Y'all, change offers us new opportunities for impact. This is a new road that we're walking down. And I was really struck one time when I was reading an article here at seminary. I was reading it by a guy named Erwin McManus, and he said this about the roads. He said the Christians didn't build their own roads to share the gospel. They used the roads the Romans had already built to take the gospel to the world. Y'all, this is what we want to do today. I want to spend the first part of our time together, and I want to talk about the road, because I want us to move from, not liking it to being able to stand on it, realize what we're standing on it, and to begin to understand how we can navigate that road. And then through learning how to navigate that road, talk about how it's not just shifted the modern pulpit, but how those shifts are offering us gospel impact opportunities that 10 years ago did not exist. Powerful opportunities for the average pastor and the average preacher to literally change the world around them. And so today, what I want to do is you guys have a book in front of you. It's a booklet, okay? We found out that I'm the only one that has not written a book up here, so I said, let's make a booklet. And that should help. But this is the meat of what we're talking about today, and the title of this is The New Realities of Communication. And I love playing with words and images, so originally I was thinking we're going to call this the 10 Commandments of communication, and we're going to put a little set of stone tablets up here, and it's going to be really neat. And then I realized there's way more than 10, so that image goes out the window. But the other thing I realized is this: if we call these rules or laws, we do a disservice. Because with rules and laws, we like to assign value. We like to say, I like that rule, I don't like that rule. I want to follow this law, I don't want to follow this law. What I realized through my study and through my research and through time with other people in the communication field is this: these aren't rules that we can choose to like or dislike. These are realities. It's like the air you breathe. You don't get to choose to breathe that air. You breathe that air and you exist in it. We are talking about 16 realities that you exist in. So, sure, you can waste your time assigning value to these, or you can begin to understand them and realize that this is the culture that God has placed you in. And our God is infinitely wise. And it's not an accident that you live and you preach and you teach in this time and not a time 50 years ago. So I would strongly encourage you, I would strongly encourage our Senate as a whole to stop wishing for a time that is no longer and can never be, but to start realizing the time we live in and the opportunity that has for us today to be a part of the great impact that God wants to make. And so to understand these realities, it all begins under the simple reality that we are simultaneously connected and disconnected. And I love the way we talked about that in the message today, and just the reality that, it's always kind of been that way, but today it's exaggerated. You can sit on your couch, the comfort of your own living room, by yourself with your smartphone in hand, and all of a sudden you have access to the world. It's an amazing thing. In fact, they say that the average adult has roughly 200 to 300 friends on Facebook. Okay, the average person can only keep really 150 meaningful connections, yet we have somewhere around 300 that we're connected to with the push of a button. It's amazing. But the incredible thing to me is this person can be completely connected and yet totally disconnected from everything around them. And it's easy to point out all the negative sides to it. But as I was getting ready to come out here to this talk, I realized one of the greatest positive sides of it. I can connect with people in a meaningful way I couldn't connect with in the past. As I sat in my house by myself because my wife and 2 kids got to go on vacation early, and they're sitting at the beach, and all of a sudden I get this phone call, and I'm at the park with my son, who, God bless him, looks more like my wife, and that's going to be a good thing for his life. We got to connect. In fact, it's incredible to me because even 4 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible. And now my niece, who's 4, if she hears that phone ring, and she sees you talking on the phone, but she cannot see who you are talking to, she gets angry because it created a new expectation for connection, even though you're disconnected. The other reality that we live in is this: we have very personalized boundaries, more so than ever before. In fact, every single platform that you're going to step onto has these things we like to call privacy settings. So while we're sharing things with the world, we choose how much we will or will not share with the world. We choose what platform we will or will not share that on. And it's created new expectations. Probably the greatest shift I've seen for pastors and preachers is this: it's created the expectation that in the past, if somebody came to visit your church, you could just show up. In fact, it was told that you should show up that day or the next day with what? Like a loaf of bread or the coffee mug with the church logo on there, right? No longer. In fact, I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's hazardous to your health in an area where everyone carries a gun. What people expect now, due to a plethora of platforms and options for connections, is that you will first connect with them in a way that they have connected with you before you have that face-to-face interaction. It's no longer appropriate to just show up and surprise somebody. So how do we as church begin to navigate that? Something we did at our church is this: we have a thing called check-in, and we play this video each week before we start service.
One of the best ways to interact with us during worship and throughout the week is on the Point Knox mobile app. If you don't have it, you can download it by searching your app store for The Point Knox. We'd love to know you were here, whether it's your first time or you come out all the time. So go ahead and check in. You can check in using your phone number, Facebook, Twitter, or even Instagram. It's one of the best ways to connect with us if you have a prayer request or you're interested in joining an impact team, want more information about Jesus, recommitting your life to Christ, a call from the pastor, or even getting baptized. So pull out the Point Knox mobile app, and we look forward to connecting with you.
See, the thing about personal boundaries is this. It's not that people don't want to connect. They just have more options on how they can connect. And so we as a church said, well, let's try to connect with people how they want to connect. So I started working with a programmer on a check-in platform that would be a little bit more robust. And so now when I sit down with our connection team, they've got a simple rule. You may connect with people the way they connected with you. So when somebody leaves us a phone number, they're able to call them or text them. If somebody leaves an email, they'll send them an email. If somebody connects on Facebook, they'll use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And the reason for that is this. We want to connect with people how they want to connect with you. And we realize that that will lead to a moment often where we can sit down and still do the face-to-face. But in fact, when we sit down and do the face-to-face, after we've respected the highly personalized boundaries, the connection is deeper and goes there quicker because people already feel like they have a pre-existing relationship with you. So the boundaries are more personalized, but it's not a bad thing. There's an expectation we have for immediacy. See, something with culture is this. Every time we have a shift in technology, it changes our understanding of time and how quickly things should be done. So in the past, before you had something like a telegraph and you had letters, it was the expectation that you wouldn't hear from somebody for 2 to 3 weeks, and that was okay. It was culturally acceptable. Then all of a sudden, you start developing technology where that can become a little more immediate. So when you have a phone, you expect to be able to have a phone call, but only when you're in front of the phone line, and now all of a sudden, you've got not only a phone in front of you, but email and Twitter and Facebook and all these things, so you begin to expect things immediately because you know you have immediate access. So all of a sudden in our culture, seconds feel like minutes, minutes feel like hours, hours feel like an eternity. It's the reality we live in. But it's really interesting to me how it's shaping things. I was getting ready to do a lunch with a guy that goes to our church. He's a VP of technology security at Clayton Homes. And so he's very tech savvy. And he texted me to let me know he was going to be about 10 minutes late. So for me, I'm like, that's fine. I'll sit here, hold down the fort, do a little more work on the smartphone. And then the next thing I know, I get this text. And it says, Jody Swafford has invited you to join WASI. I don't know what WASI is, but I was curious. Waze? Waze. Hey, let me tell you this. You're streaming this? Oh, that's awesome. Okay, Waze, not WASI. So I clicked on WASI because you weren't there to tell me it's Waze. And all of a sudden, this pops up. And I'm like, now I'm sitting in the restaurant, and all of a sudden I can watch him drive in real time. I don't care that much. But it's cool that I could do it. But something like this was developed because of the expectation for immediate understanding of where people are. And that has kind of snowballed into this thing that's a demand for reciprocity. So not only do we have this demand for things instantly, but we also have a demand that when we put something out there into the digital world, I want to hear back from you. And I want to hear back from you immediately. Now, we live in what's called a 24/7 culture. And people are not 24/7. I don't know about you, but I got at least 6 hours of sleep last night because I need them. We can't operate like that. And so sometimes it's becoming difficult with having people that have this expectation to be heard from, which, right or wrong, is just the way it is, and know that they can be heard from immediately. How do we navigate that? I have another friend up in Minneapolis, Dave Larson. He's a church planter. Church planters are busy. I've learned this. But Dave Larson is not just a church planter, he's a worker priest church planter. So now all of a sudden, he's really busy. And not only is he a worker priest church planter, but he has 4 kids. He's a busy that I can't begin to fathom. And so I was sitting on his board and we were talking about something, and so I shot him an email. And not 1 second later, I get this response back from Dave, explaining to me that he's not able to be on email all the time, that he is looking forward to responding to my email. I felt special. And that he will get back to me as soon as he can. See, Dave recognizes that people have a demand for reciprocity, and so he wants to create a platform that's going to honor the fact that he can't be 24/7, and he is busy, and he has a lot of things on his plate, but he also wants to honor the cultural understanding that I want to hear from you. So now I can go back to what I'm doing, because I'm not thinking about whether Dave got my email or not, or whether it offended him or not, or why I am so self-centered. Some of you got that. That's good. This is one I want to sit on for a second. We as a people, we are emboldened by anonymity. This, for us, has become a huge, huge issue. Because the reality is we have these public platforms, highly public platforms, in which we can send things out to the world, but we can engage with those in the privacy of our own home, in our own office, the place that we used to think about things a little bit before we would engage with somebody face to face. Now all of a sudden what we're seeing is that people are letting the deepest, darkest thoughts of their heart out for the world to see without thinking about the ramifications or consequences, not just for themselves, but for the people they're engaging. Now, as a pastor, even as early in ministry as I am, I've experienced this a lot. My favorite was when we did a bar church event. We're in the South. For you Lutherans, you're like, bar church, brilliant. In the South, less people are saying brilliant, but it's an incredible outreach opportunity. And so I wanted to honor that. I didn't throw it out on the radio or anything. We just we're doing it. And somebody that used to be engaged with our church threw up a post. And they basically said, I used to go to this church, but bar and church together, I don't think so. And if they'd have left it at that, it'd been fine. But as you can see, all of a sudden, they continued commenting and adding posts. They started saying things that just weren't true, like the pastor was there getting drunk before the worship service, which is just crazy talk. But here they had this platform, and never once did I get a phone call. Never once did somebody decide to sit down in front of me and say, hey, why are you doing this? This is actually, Brian Wilson, the only person that has been banned from the Point Facebook page. And it takes a while to get banned, but we'll do it. See, that's the reality we live in, and I wish I could say it was just with parishioners. I've experienced this with my brothers in ministry. One time I did a worship conference, and somebody blogged about it. That's fine. Blog about what we're doing. That's okay. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, I started reading through the comment threads, and I saw a classmate who was basically laying down some slander, who didn't even bother to pick up the phone and call me. And we used to hang out and drink beer together on the seminary campus. That's the world we're living in. And I wish I could tell you it was just on the the grassroots part of our synod, but I've seen this happen at every single level of our denomination. And the reason this is something we have to realize and address is this. We are an awful, awful witness to the people around us. Our unchristian friends are looking at what's being posted, and we're being tagged in on Facebook, and they're saying, why would I engage with a Christ that says he's love if these are the people that are supposedly supposed to embody that love in the world? They look no different than I do. This is an issue that we have to address, and we have to learn to operate in better. Finally, there's a new reality, and this is one of my favorite realities. The digital world carries with it unintended legacies. See, we're able to post things and delete things and do that so quickly that we don't really think about how long those things are actually there, because you can delete it so quickly. But the reality is the digital world has a life that far extends even our own lives. We have no idea how long things can be out there. This was really made clear by a teacher in her primary class who wanted to get across to her students that a platform called Snapchat, in which you take a picture and you actually set a time limit on how long you can view the picture, can actually last a lot longer than they anticipate and go out farther than the community they intended it for. And so she did this. She took a Snapchat with her class, and she put on a simple poster. This is a private Snapchat pic. Please share, like, and comment where you are. Help me show my primary class how private this pic really is. And I thought this was really interesting because it got screenshotted, And then I found it on Facebook, where it had over 10,000 likes and 8,000 comments. I found it on a different platform. And here these students are using Snapchat, which was a platform originally set up for a little thing called sexting, in a private context that is now very public. And the reason we talk about this is we need to understand the ramifications of digital legacy, not only for ourselves as preachers and pastors, but because the people in your pews have a digital legacy that they're wrestling with, a past that they're trying to escape, but now culture has made it difficult to escape. That's a digital legacy. The other thing that we're starting to know is our society is becoming increasingly informal, probably because of the limited amount of characters that you have doing things like texting and stuff. So this is coming across in the way we dress. I was very impressed. My brother he's a financial analyst. And he started being a financial analyst with a wind energy company. And his job was to develop million-dollar financial models for wind energy projects. And he showed up to work every single day playing with millions and millions of dollars in jeans and a button-up. And that was the acceptable attire. You can actually throw emoticons in emails, and it's acceptable. So this is where our culture is going. And so that was really a surprising thing to me, but your people are becoming increasingly informal because your culture is becoming increasingly informal. The thing that really stuck out to me was here in New York Times, they said the church is more informal like society, study finds. And that was posted, I think, just a few weeks ago. So that's something to check out. The other thing that we've learned in this culture is that authenticity is essential. We can no longer pretend to be something we are not. And the reason for that is people like you, people like me, we've spent our entire lives being marketed to. And if you're marketed to enough as a child, learning that G.I. Joe will change your life only to find out that his leg's going to break off 2 days later, you realize that some of these messages you're receiving, they aren't really everything they're said to be. And so you become increasingly savvy. Now, increase the number of messages that you're being bombarded with, and all of a sudden, you become increasingly savvy for sheer sake of survival. And this is something that affects everyone in the sense of even McDonald's. You know McDonald's? I'm loving it. You know that phrase, right? And you know how we grew up eating McDonald's, and Mom said, oh, here's a healthy option. Let's roll in here, and we'll get the 12-piece chicken McNuggets. You guys, wolf those things down. McDonald's, a billion-dollar corporation, has actually realized that they can no longer sell and promote the food the way they used to because the millennial generation has backlashed. This was just posted a few days ago. A McDonald's CEO is forced to promise better food because millennials now not only are frustrated with the food they've been given, but they also have a platform to voice those frustrations. And what they're realizing is, well, now we have to engage with it. So now your Big Mac has a fruit option on the side. That's the power of the community that we're living in right now. The next thing that's really important, especially as preachers, Lutheran preachers, we have an advantage to this. Our sermons are so short. Brevity is necessity. Brevity is necessity. You've got to think about all the messages people are being bombarded with. And so all of a sudden, because of all these messages, you have to learn to be short, concise, and yet have quality content to go with it. To give you guys an example, they took the top 50 YouTube videos, and they found out the top 50 YouTube videos are about 3 minutes in length. This just kind of shows you where our culture is going with that. And not only is brevity necessity, but people are learning that feedback loops are demanded. See, like we've said several times, we used to live in a top-down culture. A culture where the corporation or the people that were in charge would tell you exactly what they wanted you to know and exactly what they wanted you to hear, where somebody like me would stand up and lecture and you would take it in and you would go your way. But now that's no longer accepted for people because they have so many options to engage and interact, and they have that level of expectation that they will be able to engage and interact at some level. That's why this little thing called the pound sign became what we like to call the hashtag that people would use to engage with everything from your call service to major events to major issues happening in the world. There's a demand that we would have those feedback loops. And the reality with those feedback loops is this. The back channels are always open. This is going to be a bit of a grainy image, but I love this image. I found it in a marketing book on digital communication. And it kind of shows you the reality. Students now are being given laptops when they come into school, and you're sitting there in the average lecture class, and all of these computers are open. And what you begin to realize is all of these computers are connected to the internet through Wi-Fi, and every single person in this audience actually has the ability to communicate with an audience all their own. So here we are in St. Louis, Missouri, on Concordia Seminary campus, engaging with an audience who has an audience that they can engage with. It's the back channel. This is why when you go to conferences, you'll find out that there's a whole conversation going on behind the conversation that's going on. It's the reality of the back channel, and it's something that we have to learn to navigate. You can't control it, but you can learn to leverage it. It'll be a powerful thing we'll talk about in a minute. The other reality we're faced with is this: synchronicity without geography. And this, for me, is one of my favorite realities of the digital age. I know I'm not supposed to assign value to it, but I do have a favorite. And this is it. Because this, to me, is one of the greatest opportunities for impact that we have been given. It's a gift from God. The reality that we can engage in real time in this place and be able to engage in real time with other people thousands of miles away is a powerful thing. Not just so that I can FaceTime with my kid while he's on the playground, but so that we can begin to see real impact. Something I love is we've started to leverage this as a church, and it didn't mean adding any time to our worship service. It didn't mean adding any extra work on my plate, which is already full. But we just said, you know what? We're going to allow people to engage with us. So here we're going to offer a live stream option right through the mobile app. And so we offered this live stream option. We started live streaming. And this is what I found out. In Knoxville, Tennessee, this is an incredible opportunity to stay connected with people who would normally become disconnected. See, in Knoxville recently, we had what you call a snowfall that shut everything down. And I know what you guys are thinking. 6-foot drifts, blizzard conditions, right? No. This is Knoxville, Tennessee. Dust on the ground, threat of snow. Worst worship attendance we had all year. Over half of our people showed up. The first service, I felt like we had just replanted. Right? It was like sparsely populated there. I think we got like 60, maybe 70 people in the auditorium. But all of a sudden, what I found out from our live stream team was this. We had another 60 or 70 people that were at that exact moment live streaming the service. We take texted questions every week, and we actually had people who were live streaming the service who were snowed in, who were texting in their questions and actually beginning to engage with us. And all of a sudden, what could have been one of our worst attended Sundays for us, like 170 people, turned into a Sunday where we had 170 people live and over 150 people live streaming, making it one of our best attended Sundays of the year. See, this is an incredible opportunity. Think about the shut-in who wishes they could get up and wishes they could go to service. And I had a friend, Justin Bell, who lives up the street from me, and he says, man, think about the implications of this when it comes to just being able to do intergenerational ministry. Because all of a sudden you take the young person in your church who wants to engage and you send them to the elderly person's house. You help them set up a simple system where they can live stream and engage with the service on a Sunday. And I know you guys are thinking, well, yeah, you guys have access to all kinds of technology. No, this has been one of the most frustrating things in my ministry. We couldn't quite get it to work right until I finally just got so frustrated. I said, Seth, give me the iPhone, set it up in front, and set it to stream. And that's how we started. And it allowed people to engage. It's an opportunity to leverage the gospel that it didn't exist before. It existed, but not in the hands of us, the average preacher, the average teacher, the average pastor. It's a powerful thing. What you need to realize, though, in this culture, with our ability to be the average person and shoot this out, is our people, as we have said, have a huge competition for attention. I remember walking through Times Square for the first time and just being blown away at just these huge TV screens on all the buildings around me. And what I've realized is this is my every single day reality. I will sit in my office with at least 3 screens at my access, my phone, my iPad, my computer. You can set up a technology-free zone in your church, and your people are still walking in with a screen and the ability to distract themselves. We have a real competition for attention. And the reason this is important as preachers is because content has always been important, content has always been primary, but the reality is now connection is just as important as content. In fact, if you're talking about the act of preaching, connection becomes the first thing you need to do over your content. Otherwise, if you don't connect, the phone's going to come out, and all of a sudden people are going to engage somewhere else, and you're going to keep doing your thing. But they're not going to engage with the quality content you have because you did not take the time to build a connection in a world where there is a competition for that connection. Like Ben's sermon today, opening up with Daft Punk, a brilliant move for connection so that he could get the gospel content across to his people. We've got just a few more here. Our people are crying, please help me. I'm at times crying, please help me. It's just the reality of our age. The other thing is this, you've got a lot of user-generated data. So it's not just the platforms that are vying for our attention, but the users of the platforms are actually the one that are generating the content that's being consumed. It's a very new culture, and it leads to the next reality, which is people oftentimes are living on tidbits of information. They're no longer waiting for the expert. You don't need to have the doctorate or be the person that the news channel decided to put on TV. In fact, CNN is quoting bloggers, people that pay themselves to write about what they want to write. And here's the reality of tidbits of information. This is a very individual issue. So if you, as an individual, you're somebody that loves to dive deep, you're going to find that the waters are deeper than they have ever been before and more easily accessed. But if you're an individual that loves to stay on the surface, you're going to find it's very easy to build opinions and formats with the sound bites that people throw out. It's very individualized, but it's a reality we live in, that people live on tidbits of information. And this last point, this is the point that is going to frustrate the Lutheran the most. The person that's learned to navigate the acronyms and the paperwork and loves the rules. There are no hard and fast rules. In fact, you're not going to hear any hard and fast rules, because by the time you write the hard and fast rule, you doctrinally review the hard and fast rule, and you release the paper-bound book for the hard and fast rule, that platform no longer exists or applies. I love Dave's joke at the beginning. I'm excited to start my MySpace page. Because that's the reality. So in a culture like this, while rules become difficult to pin down in the traditional sense, rules become less important than really instilling for people values. Values that can transcend the platforms, that can give people a system in which they can live in which, as the platforms are changing, they can learn to navigate that in a gospel-centered way. Your people aren't crying out for rules. They're crying out for values they can use to navigate. What does this mean for us as preachers? And how does this begin to change the pulpit in which we preach? And it looks kind of like this. This was the 20th century pulpit. Presenter stands up. Presenter presents. It was very one way. You had feedback opportunities, right? That's why you went to the back of the room and you shook every hand, right? And if the message went well, they would say, "Pastor, that was a great message." And if it was a terrible message, they would say, "Pastor, isn't the weather lovely?" Their way of saying, "Can't wait to get into it, so glad you're done." That was the old pulpit. But now, based on this world we're living in, the pulpit looks radically different. And I just want to challenge you, don't allow this to overwhelm you. This is the 21st century pulpit. It's a pulpit that has 3 distinct places. One, there's the traditional live audience like we have here. But the reality of that live audience is now demanding those feedback loop opportunities. But not only are you talking about the live audience, you're talking about the back channel audience, which is the audience that your audience has, that your audience is engaging with while you are preaching the word. But not only that, and this is where incredible impact can be leveraged. You, as the preacher, have another audience outside the audience you are speaking to. an audience that you can begin to engage with without adding time or extraordinary work to your already overpacked schedule. An audience in which you can see real gospel impact. This to me right here has been one of the most powerful realities of the age that we get to work in. Because this right here is a place where you can really see lives changed. I'll start with this first one here. One of the ways we've navigated that is similar to the way you're navigating it, by allowing you to text in questions, allowing people to hashtag. Every Sunday, we encourage our people to do the same thing. And it's amazing to me the things I've seen. The questions that have been burning on people's hearts that I know they never would have stopped to ask, or if they're too introverted, they wouldn't even have set time aside to ask. Coming in and allowing our community to engage with those questions together. Questions like, Pastor, why is there so much evil in the world? One of my favorites is, Pastor, how can I get baptized? How can I begin to see faith change my life? And each and every week, we get to be engaged by these questions. It was so powerful to me because this week we were talking about the story of Rahab. And in the story of Rahab, we hit the question section, and the first question, or the last question that popped up was this. It was somebody that said, I've been coming out to the point for a few weeks now, and I feel like I've finally been able to throw my red cord out the window. I feel like each and every day God is changing my life, and He is filling me with grace. I don't know about you. That's something I want to celebrate as a church. And we had the opportunity to do that. Yes, in an anonymous way. But all of a sudden, the people that we were in the room with, they realized that this was more than just something to do on a Sunday morning that you could stack up next to something else. All of a sudden, they realized that through this act of worship together, through doing the sacraments, through preaching the word together, lives were being changed, and they were sitting right next to somebody whose life was radically different than when they'd first walked in. It's a powerful thing when you open that channel up. The way people's lives can change. Something that was really cool about the back channel is this. We throw stuff on YouTube. We throw stuff on live stream. And so I've got several friends kind of all around the world, and one of them texted or emailed me one morning and said, hey, I'm so glad you guys put your messages online. I was able to have church in China. I said, man, that's really cool. It's a closed country, right? Well, come to find out later, the story had a lot more layers to that. They had actually used the sermon we were preaching in Knoxville, Tennessee, as the sermon that their secret house church was using in their worship. And all of a sudden, I realized, thanks to the technology, I was able to actually step and be a voice for the gospel, like Paul says, those beautiful feet that take the gospel, in a country that is closed off to the gospel. It's the power of the back channels we have. But what I love the most is the baptisms. It is the getting to connect people to something in life that is not dependent on how well or how poorly their life is being lived, but it's dependent on how much our God's done for us. This is a woman who I connected with for the first time on Facebook. She came out to our church. They didn't fill out a connection card, which would have been a great avenue to get to connect, but they liked our Facebook page. And I was in the habit of going on our Facebook page and personally messaging everybody that's liked us. It doesn't take me a lot of time, and all of a sudden, I got to message her, and what I found out was the point was their last stop in church. And then they were done looking because they were just tired of living in a heavily law-based culture. And all of a sudden, they found this grace of God. And it began to change their life. And through Facebook, I was able to develop a relationship with a family that wasn't too hesitant to even fill out a connection card. And all of a sudden, we're sitting down over coffee, and she's telling me, I want to be baptized. And I said, absolutely. I would love that. But it wasn't just her. It was my friend Phil. Something we do at our church is we throw ads out on a hard rock radio station. So if you're familiar with St. Louis, the station sounds a lot like 105 The Point. Very hard rock radio station. And this guy named Phil connected. And he messaged me on Facebook one day after he'd been coming out to our church for probably about a year. And he said, when I started coming out to your church, he says, I was radically disconnected from God. I had no care for God. And through the love of this community, through the preaching and teaching, I feel like my life is connected to Christ. He said so much so that when I came to church today, he said, I saw a guy that I work with that I never invited to church. And he went up to him, he said, how did you hear about the point? He said, I saw how much your life was changing, and I was curious as to what was causing the change. So I decided to come out. I got to have that message with him through Facebook, because the challenge of being a pastor at a church, right, is that you talk to the people around you, but you don't always get to talk to the people you need to talk to. And sometimes they leave, and you don't get the opportunity to engage. But through Facebook, he messaged me. And through Facebook, we started having the conversation. And it was through Facebook that he told me he'd never been baptized. And I said, how's this Sunday? And he got baptized. Those are people that came out. But the last story I want to share with you is this story. This is the story that shows me just how much, if we leverage this culture, it can be an absolute game changer. This is a woman who heard us on the radio, and she downloaded our mobile app. And for whatever reason, she doesn't tell me, she has not set foot in our church. But she says that she regularly engages with the preaching and teaching through the mobile app. And all of a sudden, she said one day that it helped her reconnect with Jesus, being able to listen to the preaching and teaching through that app. And through reconnecting to Jesus, she said that it began to light a fire in her soul and a passion for God that she wants to share with everyone else around her. And the reality is, she has never once set foot in our church. This is the opportunity we have before us to engage a culture, that's changing rapidly, but a culture with opportunities to make an impact that never existed before. Not an impact that you get to hear somebody stand up and talk about, but an impact that you are perfectly positioned to make if you will take the time to step out of your church and into the world and learn to navigate that road that is filled with people who are desperately desiring the grace that you bring. That's the power we have to engage the digital age. So as we continue with today, I want to encourage you. Take a break from what you're planning on doing. Come out to some of the sessions. Engage with the people around you, because they've prepared some incredible content, but some content that's actually simple enough for anyone to step into and begin to engage, so that all of a sudden these don't become my stories or their stories. They become your stories, because you are in the middle of an incredible opportunity to see someone's life changed. And the powerful Holy Spirit you need, he's already in there. Let's use him on roads that have never existed before. Amen.